This is your girl Lira, and you're listening to Self Reflection Podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Self Reflection Podcast. I pray and I hope that this conversation finds you guys in the best state that you could be in for yourself in today. And if you're not doing your best, like always, I want to remind you in this moment to go ahead and create a moment for self-reflection. Self-reflection is one of those things I have found for myself that has supported me with my mental health. It has supported me with my healing journey. It has allowed me to be able to find peace in myself, in my internal self. It has allowed me to be able to ground myself in so many different ways when life throw a lot my way. So if you're not doing your best in this moment, I want to encourage you to create a moment for self-reflection. And if you cannot handle the emotions that you have going on in this moment, please go ahead and reach out, get the support that you need, right? Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, a counselor, a therapist. You're not alone in this journey. There's a lot of people that are out there willing to support you on your journey. Thank you guys so much again for joining me on Self Reflection Podcast. I am excited to have this conversation today. Our guest is someone that she and I had actually planned to have a conversation about 2 years ago. And you know what, life happens, right? And so I'm excited that, we came full circle again and we're able to be here. Today, we're going to be talking to Nicole Avery. Nicole is an American artist. Nicole is an author, an award-winning author, actually. Nicole is an educator. I'm trying to go down the list here. But you know what? Actually, guys, let me stop. Please, I want Nicole to actually introduce herself in this moment because she is phenomenal. She is an author. What aren't you, Nicole? Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Nicole Avery here.
First off, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful that we finally are having this conversation. And, God knows when. He knows when to allow things to happen. And so I'm grateful to be here. As you said, I am an American artist, but I also am a Jamaican American artist. My family is from Jamaica, and my mother decided to come here and have her 3 girls. So that runs in my veins. Yes, I was an educator for a very long time, a teacher per se, and professor. I'm still an educator because I'm a lifelong learner. Eclectic in so many different ways of creating art, dance, performance, visual, some fine art, and vocal as well. I'm also a voiceover artist. So there's a lot that I enjoy doing and I'm very passionate about. I'm just going to end right there.
Yes, I do want to talk about, a little bit of the art cover. Is that the Victory, the book?
This is definitely what's behind me. One of the pages. That's actually the back of a calendar that I made with the book from Victory. So yes, you probably can't see it. Let me look. No, you can't see. There's several pictures that are within the book, but I also do have the book with me. I don't know if we can see. This is the cover. Yeah, you might be able to see it a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. So that is a campaign that I had did in, I think, 2018. And it showed at one of the spaces within Columbia University. And so it talks about the Black female body, which is part of my research. And it stemmed from the research that I did at Columbia when obtaining my doctorate.
Yeah. Looking at the art, did you do the art on that cover?
So the art, the face painting is mine, as well as the photography. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you are, the lady that does it all, I swear.
You have to, Dave, because, the thing is, when you don't film your own work, you don't really own it. And that's a hassle. I want to be able to print my work wherever I want to print it. I want to be able to do what I want with my work. And I don't want to have to, go through someone to say, hey, can I use that? I mean, there are some great photographers out here, but, Having that background really, really helps and suits well when you are creating work of this magnitude.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for joining us on Self Reflection Podcast. I hope that this conversation is going to bring light to so many things that women of color are experience. And also, if you're listening to this conversation, it's going to be more on the spiritual spectrum. So if this is something that you might not feel comfortable about, maybe this is not the episode for you. But if you're a young woman, right, no matter what race, Black, white, Asian, Puerto Rican, blue, green, if you're a young woman that is looking to find spirituality for themselves, right, this might be the conversation that you want to listen to. Talking about spirituality, how did you find your own journey in that space?
In terms of art making?
In terms of just finding yourself spiritually.
Well, I was chosen by God. There's no other way to say it. I was removed from my mom's house. I was a ward of New York State. Mm-hmm. By the age of 9, I was moved out permanently. And so I came into a foster care home that was one that was loving and believed in the highest power. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with him right away. Going to one of the church meetings, I gave my heart to Christ at 9 years old. So I've been on that journey ever since. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Because I think spirituality is something that because Christianity took a lot of, the whole in a lot of people's life. I think spirituality is something that people are still trying to move back into, right? Because a lot of us believe in Christianity instead of spirituality. If that makes sense, I'm not,
spirituality is such a larger organism. I think that Christianity and religion is part of spirituality. So when I speak to spirituality, I speak of my connection and my synergy with the Most High. I don't necessarily, there's other portions of it, but he's at the crux of everything for me. Even art making, I'm going beyond self. And that's another thing that I see as a way to express spirituality is being beyond oneself. Mm-hmm. Right? And how do you get beyond oneself? There's a million ways to do that. And that's why I'm saying it's such a broad term that I had to kind of fine tune it by saying my spirituality rests in my connection to God. Mm-hmm. Right. Because it depends on who you talk to, what the answer is going to be. The connotation is what I was going to say, because it's not a definition. It's not a definitive. It's not defined. It's evolving. It is ever changing. And so for me, the only one constant is the Most High. My life morphs, my life shifts, but he does not. He remains the same yesterday, today, and forever, because my mind is so small in capacity to understand his. It would be unending trying to uncover and unearth all that he is.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. With your research focusing on fragmenting of Black feminine identity, what are some misunderstandings you hope to clarify today or elude through your work?
So I talk about the fragility of the Black female identity, and it comes based upon images through the media, old and new, and just being resurfaced and recycled. This cyclication of these particular visuals. Mm-hmm. And one visual in particular, or imagery, is the auction block, the slave auction block, which is, of course, American slavery. And so because of this this interplay between those on the auction block and those auctioning those individuals, in that imagery. We see that in people's DNA today. So when you see a police officer brutally dragging a Black woman out of her car, when you know as a male, you have so much more strength than her. I don't care what she may or may not have done, because remember, you're not guilty until when, right? In the courtroom. So to pull her out and feel comfortable enough to do that, but you would not do that to a counterpart.
Mhm.
If that person was your aunt, your daughter, or someone you knew in your neighborhood, and you happen to be white, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, the audacity to commandeer someone's space when you're talking to them. And I'm putting you in the mind of the auctioneer, right? And so because they had the ability to touch and handle our body parts, our
Mhm.
head, just us, and invade our space, that has trickled down even to 2025 to say, I have the right to film you, even though you're not doing anything wrong. I have the right to taunt you, to call you names, because this is what was done for so long. And not only do we see it in movies, but we see it in there are codes and roles that have been placed into these visuals that trigger these reactions based on what has traveled through the DNA of many of these auctioneer uh, ancestors to the present day individual.
Yeah. And when you talk, I hear the lack of humanity there, you know, because no matter what, I like you said, no matter what the person have done, I think if you are leading or policing with empathy, which that is not always the case, but at the end of the day, we're all human, right? If
Right.
you're leading with empathy, it doesn't mean that it's weakness, but I feel like there would be some type of understanding of the human being that is being dragged around in that space.
But when you look at these visuals, excuse me, they are intentionally
Mm,
divorced from what you just said, because that's not the purpose behind them.
yeah.
The purpose is to look at this individual as if to strip them of their humanity. And it makes it simpler to be able to rape someone. It makes it simpler to be able to mishandle someone. You get what I'm saying? So it's the intention behind. And although for many people today it is unwitting, not everyone. And because of this administration, I will say that people have become, those thoughts have become the focal point, and they've come front and center, and
Mhm.
people are emboldened. But there are those who genuinely don't realize this is what they're doing, because they've been given the permission for so long, and no one has tapped them on the hand to say, this is not how you treat these individuals. So that's what my work speaks to. It illuminates, as you say, or enlightens the viewer as to what really is taking place.
Mhm.
Whether it's through the artwork itself or the blurbs underneath to explain, or these talks like what I'm having right now.
Yeah.
But the mitigating part is removing these stigmas, um, explaining, because we don't want to forget what has taken place, right? You don't want to just say, okay, we're just not going to show these films anymore. No, they're important just like everyone else's history, but they have to be done, like you said, with the empathy and with the intention of not harming, but educating. And
Yeah.
they have to be shown in specific spaces. So, you know, I've studied um, commercials, I've studied all sorts of visuals to understand what these roles and codes are that a lot of people take for granted. You can
Mhm.
call them liminals, you can call them all sorts of things, but they're codes that have been placed in so that, again, it triggers certain reactors in the body scientifically.
Yeah. That subconscious programming that we get. When it comes down to spirituality speaking, right? How do you see Black women in healing communities and history?
Uh, I I know that Black females cannot heal anyone until they heal themselves. Now, I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but at what cost? Further damage to themselves, death. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
now in this present state, we have to look to ourselves first, and we have to heal ourselves primarily. And it reminds me of being on the plane and them saying, well, before you can help anyone else, put that mask on. You've got to put it on yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that we have to stop and say, I'm going to take this time to work on me. And even as you're working on yourself, I find like it's okay to help other people, but to, at least if it's getting counseling, right? You talked about that earlier. You know, maybe some of us need the professional help. Some of us need to even sit and say, this is something I think I do need to work on, or this is something that I need to undo, you know. But I know that before we can heal a populace of people, we have to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
So in terms of history, the healing comes with confronting the history, but also being able to give voice. If you don't listen to what I have to say, how do I heal? How do I undo what is taking place? How do I understand if I'm just doing all the intake? If I'm just doing all the intaking and there's no reciprocation, it doesn't work.
Do you, do you think that in our society today, that's part of like the problem, not the problem, but that's something that is hindering many Black women to heal in our society today? Because when you look into society, oftentimes Black women are too strong, or we are strong, and we are not often given that space to feel as if we can express ourselves or give us the voice to express ourselves.
So I think it begins with social constructs, right? And understanding who creates them and who is in this alleged agreement, right? And so to whom are we too strong?
Mm.
To whom are we too loud? To whom are we too angry? Do we look at the causations? Do we look at the crux of the matter? Do we look at how these things are developing within this group of individuals? You know, I think about all of the women who were tested on medically without anesthesia, Black women more
Yeah.
so. I think we're the only race, but we're talking about Black women.
Yes.
And doctors really feeling as though white doctors, Caucasian doctors, European doctors, feeling as though this is not going to hurt them because they're strong. So again, I ask, where do these tropes, where do these stereotypes, where do these ideologies, where do these social constructs come from, and who signs them off in history, in the books?
Yeah.
In charge of that. So I think if we look at that first, that will kind of break down some of the untruths that have been circling around us. Do we fit into roles that perhaps were not necessarily ordained by God?
Mm.
Perhaps. But again, we have to look to history. If you did not break up the Black family, and I'm saying you, I'm just saying the powers that be, and they know who they are, right? If you didn't break up the Black family, then maybe I would not have to step in and be the dad. If we go further back, we're not even going to talk about, the era, probably was the 60s and 70s, where I think it was welfare being willing to give women who had no partner
Yeah.
more, have you, right, to sustain their family. So
Yeah.
that was the oust of the Black man. And how did that's a talk for another time, but what did that do to the Black man's psyche, right? A lot going on, right?
Yeah.
Because people are sitting in their planning, just like when I used to plan for my lessons. They just don't come off the top of my head. Even if they do, I have to sit and I have to negotiate and navigate how am I going to disseminate this information. So now, God had given me something. Give me a second. The structure of the family. So now let's go back to, thank you, Lord. Let's go back to the sex forms.
I was,
So
I
now
was,
you're telling me that I am going to recover. There was a little boy on social media yesterday, and I don't want to get emotional. We're talking about Palestinians and Israel, what's going on. I'm not taking a side, although I have one. And this little Palestinian boy, his eyes were wired open because he had witnessed the murder of his entire family. That now is injected into his bloodstream, his DNA, and that will be passed on. That trauma will be passed on. So how do you tell someone who was forced to sleep with their sister, a brother who was forced to sleep with his sister to procreate, mother, father, whomever, and then you just go, okay, well, that happened 400 years ago. No, you act like it happened one time 400 years ago. It happened cyclically, right? Over again. And so now when it's stuck in someone's DNA and we see it on the news, it is disgusting. But where did it come from? Yeah. Again, we're not looking at the causation. We're looking at the people. We're saying, oh, they're disgusting. You know, when you're looking on social media and they're like, there's the Black people again. You're coming in at the end of the movie and you're giving away what you think is the answer. So that's the problem, is not being able to undo and go back and start healing from there. And wondering why these demonic forces are following me. Because we're looking at it spiritually, that's what it is. You want to look at it scientifically, it's DNA. You want to look at it emotionally, it's trauma. You know, and so all of these ways of seeing these lenses shed light on the causation, which is not us. We're here now, we're dealing with it. And I know people like, oh my God, it's 400 years. But look, like, I don't get how people just wake up and think things are going to end. Like, okay, I get it that a president came in, or someone who's pretending to be a president is coming in, and that's how I feel. And then they're just changing things all of a sudden. But it still doesn't work that way, because there are laws that have been put in place to say, this is how things work. This is how, you know what I'm saying? And so imagine 400 years of laws, or of undoings, or happenings rather, not even undoing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that, because when you were talking, the plantation came in, right? And I'm not talking about the cotton farm plantation. I'm talking about the plantation, baby making plantation of Black women, just being put in one place to have babies over and over and over.
Think about this. I'm sorry to cut you off, but when you said that, this is the imagery that came to my mind, right? And I wasn't there, but this is the imagery that sparks, right?
Yeah.
Having your baby, regardless, ripped out of your hand, doesn't matter who it's from, but it's still your baby, because that's the connection that you were given as a woman. Yeah. And now you're having a white baby suckle from your breast. What psychologist was around to help her? Mm. And so now you, in your present state, you're wondering, where are some certain thoughts coming from? Who's taking the time to talk? And I know there are people. I'm not making this. I'm not going to make a blanketed statement. I'm just saying, raising this question in my soul, in my being, saying, who is working to undo all of that, and who can? It's so much. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go on, because I interrupted you.
No, please interrupt me anytime. Please, let's break up a little bit here. Let's talk about your time in LA. You and I had a conversation off camera a little bit, and you had some, I would use the word interesting. I don't even think that's the appropriate word to use there. Some really interesting interaction in LA. Do you want to give us a bit background on what really happened in that space, and how did it impact you, and what forces or spiritual battles were you fighting in that space?
Oh my God. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to even discuss that, because when we talk about the disrespect of a Black woman because of this comfortability, I was already dealing with a lot at work, right? I feel like it was racially charged. I don't know what the other person would have felt as though. And so I had a fall at work, and I was out. was out on workers' compensation, and I started being followed. But what the individuals didn't like is that I was evading them. Just being the New Yorker that I am. And, LA is a very different ball game from New York. And it was during that time. Again, with social media, things have changed and the internet. But while I was there, you could be seen and not heard. You could be pretty and not heard.
Mm.
Behind the scenes, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I've had guys who wanted to fight me because I didn't want to talk to them. Right. I didn't want to give them the time of the day. And it took other guys to be like, come on, man, like, what are you doing? That sort of thing. I'm a New Yorker. Guys don't care about that out here. They're just like, whatever, well, not the mature guys, because there are some now. It's, like I said, it might be a different ball game. And so anyway, I started being harassed by workers' compensation individuals who were finding ways on private property. Mm. I'm believing that my neighbors were being paid because I saw their houses being painted and boxes filled with gifts like guitars and things that are very expensive. All of a sudden, I'd had different individuals jumping out of bushes to try to capture me on film, and I caught them, and they're like, oh my God. So, I have my proof. It's not like I'm just saying this out of nowhere. And when they weren't successful with all of that in the what I call the natural or the physical realm, they started in the spiritual realm. I had neighbors move from the sides of my home where I was living. And I was living in a manufactured home. So the street is very, very small because, of course, you don't really have sidewalks. And so I knew a lot about the neighbors across from me. And I found out that they all were embracing witchcraft. I remember a neighbor coming over and introducing herself, and they're offering wine and things like that. And so of course you have your cup, and I'm like, in hindsight now, I'm like, oh, now they have my DNA, but they have it in the spiritual realm. And so I began fighting spiritual warfare at the highest level. I had dogs sicked on me. I had dog poop placed on my roof to try to create, smell, whatever. I had people astral projecting and coming into my home. I had physical people coming into my home trying to break up things, put things in my food. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. But because I was, one, a single woman, but I was also a Black woman. These people were white. Some of them Latino. And some, I don't know. I don't even know if they considered themselves a Latino. I'm from the Northeast. So I know my folks out here, they consider themselves a Latino, many of them. They were Mexican American, perhaps. I can't say that they were or weren't because I didn't have that conversation with them, but that is my guess. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately in LA, the Mexican community and the African American community are often at odds. I was not, used to that. Yes, we have folks out here who don't believe that they're Black. I know Black, the Dominicans, whatever. There's some that do say that they are. That's a running joke. Forgive me if I offended anyone. So it was a different dynamic. And so it was spiritual to none other. I found out that the property that my home was built on actually was built on a Native American graveyard.
Oh, wow.
So that added to the mix. So now we're talking about necromancy. We're talking about, using the dead for all sorts of things. The goof of dust. I mean, it was like spiritual warfare 401. It wasn't 101. It was 401. And I learned so much. I did. Excuse me. But I found that the Black American church had really let me down in LA. I had one preacher that told me, the church is broke, which was his way of saying, like, if you don't have money, I'm not praying for you. And I'm like, for prayer? Dude, seriously? I had a woman who we played phone tag to no end. And I just was really annoyed because I'm like, if I said I had a dance troupe that wanted to come over and dance for free or whatever, you would eat that up. You would call me and be like, okay, Dr. Avery, come on over. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I just kind of gave up. I remember attending a very two high profile churches in LA, no names. And I remember one, the pastor was prophetic, and I walked into the church and he said, some of us have things following us, And it's not until God frees us that they're not going to go away. So I knew that he saw what was going on. But in the other hand, this man never laid a hand on me when I went up for prayer. He walked beside me. I brought people to church. He laid his hand to pray on them, and never took the time to ask, do you need prayer for whatever? Never. I was so hurt. I was beyond words. I still follow him from time to time because now it's just, online church. So it's not a big deal. But there was another church that you talk about counseling and stuff. I went for counseling because I didn't, in the beginning, I didn't know what was going on. And I was like, with my family history, I was like, well, let me just, check this out. And they literally had me sitting in the lobby for over 8 hours. I stayed the entire day to see if one person would talk to me.
Wow.
And I wrote a message on the book saying that I was ignored, and I hope the pastor reads this. I also received a text right after when I left, and they're like, oh, do you want us to pray now? And I'm like, why? Because I'm not there, and you can see the demons around me. Are you afraid? Like, what's going on? Are you not prepared? I had a huge problem with that. And so from that moment, I promised myself that I would study the same way I did with my research, excuse me, to find out what was going on. And I did. I'm still not where I need to be, but I've come so very far. And I am really trying to help others that are going through it now. And that's, again, that healing that we talked about. I couldn't help anyone else until I knew what was going on. And I even had, God had told me to start like a prayer team. And I did. It was a very small group, which I was grateful for. 3 beautiful women that I've known either through undergrad or where I worked at Yankee Stadium as a vendor. Shout out to all the vendors at Yankee Stadium, because a lot of them hate me. So shout out. So we prayed, and, I was coming into my knowing then, but I really could not help as much as I can now. So while I, of course, never wanted to have gone through what I went through, I am grateful that I do know that my family was at the helm of a lot of my suffering, and I didn't know. Because, again, I told you I'm Jamaican American, and that's why it was important for me to say that. And because I feel like I'm one step away from being African, even though I am African. Because of being Jamaican, I know that we're only like one culture removed, is what I want to say. And so they were practicing witchcraft for years, and I had no idea. Feeding me stuff, trying to create all sorts of weird responses, I'll just say. And I came into a knowing. And I'm really grateful for that, because I loved my cousins dearly. And I can't say that I don't love them anymore. I love them enough to get into heaven, is what I tell everyone. And it's true. I'm not going to hate anyone, but I don't have that same regard that I once did for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, when you say that, like you said, we're one, like I feel like we're all one, right? We're one. We come from the same type of like background, I would even say, and this is real, right? People experience this witchcraft thing. It's so real. And it's scary how, even though we are in this country, right, in the US, where you think that it will not work or it will not be present, right, it is heavily practiced still here as well,
But
and
that also comes from all of the folks who've come over to America, right? So that's my thing, right? The issue, because that's what they planted in this earth. As long as they get their message across, that's all they care about. So you have Roman Catholics that practice witchcraft daily, have folks that look like you and me from every diaspora there is, right? Haitian, Jamaican, just the Caribbean in general, right? Because that's brought over as well. One thing I do want to interject and say, it's funny that we've used it against each other, but what happened during American slavery? We blame God, but where were your demons then? Because you were fighting a bigger demon. But anyway, I digress. So you have all of these individuals who are bringing, their practices over, and it builds.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I almost slipped and said someone's name, but thank God I didn't. So you have other people who are like me, who are born here, and you were not, because I was also raised in foster care. I didn't have I wasn't in tune to my culture as much as I am now, because I'm grown. I can, figure out things. So you have people like myself who want to gain access to their culture, but they do it in a derogatory way, and so they look to see how they can undermine other individuals because of their spiritual gifts that God has given them. Or again, if we look at it in a spirituality way, all of the showerings that
Yeah.
have, and so the jealousy creeps in, and it becomes a war or a battle between, could be siblings, could be cousins, could be mother and daughter. And it happens all the time. And it's so pervasive throughout the Caribbean culture. And there's huge communities. Like, I lived in Washington Heights. And when I tell you I was harassed to no end, I had no idea that I was living next to a witch, and that the super, he was a warlock. So imagine fighting those two all day long. And the witch's daughter, who was, I guess, trying to become one. I saw demons all the time. I fought demonic forces. I saw things in the spirit realm because I'm prophetic. And it was a lot.
Yeah.
But there's this silencing. Again, we talk about silence. I was living my research. Okay. And there is also a silent current that exists, like these blue codes, right? These, I call them blue walls with the police.
Mm.
People speak against their own. So who in Washington Heights is going to say, yeah, you may not want to live there, because no one's doing that. They're just like, please don't bother me. It was terrible. It was horrible. And if you are not careful, you could end up hating a whole culture because of it, because that's how bad it was. And it was coming from so many different individuals. But I refuse, because thank God, being an educator, I have grown up, because of course I was much younger when I started teaching, and I grew up with my students, and they were from all different backgrounds, south of the border, from the Caribbean, Africa, you name it. And so I just love people, thank God,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. Very powerful story there. When it comes onto like history, right? How do historical narrative about Black women still impacts the way Black femininity is perceived in today's society, both within and outside of the Black community?
Well, we talked a little bit about the handling of Black females, and it does play into how um, history allows us to perceive the contemporary Black female. We see
Mhm.
in different hip hop videos. I'm sorry, because in my head I'm seeing everything. So this need to be naked, and you have stars like Beyonce who are placing it under the guise of feminism. But nakedness doesn't necessarily mean feminism. And what is feminism really? Right? It's like spirituality. It's such a broad term. What are people really trying to say? So I think it's just being couched um, in a way that is more palatable for some people. But what it's doing to the younger people is saying that in order to thrive as a female, it's okay to be ratchet.
Mhm.
And I think everything has its place. You're with your homegirls, you're in a party, sometimes you hang out in your apartment, you're wilding out. That's fine. Nobody can see that. I don't need to see that on social media. And it also doesn't need to spill over into eateries where you have older couples of any color. I could care less, what the color of the individuals are, but you have men who are visual. We know that. So why would you tempt someone's husband or boyfriend? This culture of being the side chick or whatever, it's insane. And so it stems again from the auction block, where women's clothing, Black women, let me be specific, were ripped, the garments ripped from their bodies so that the auctioneers or the person who's perhaps going to purchase can check out the goods. This is what we hear all the time, getting a test run and whatever, right? And so now people feel comfortable, even ourselves. Because I know I was definitely going through a time in my life when I just wanted to be free, right? Because I had that freedom when I was in foster care. But I was so blessed to be around so many wonderful individuals. I could say names right now, but I don't want them to feel shy about it. But guys who never tried anything, and they really kind of sat me down like, Nick, you don't have to do that, because this is the real game. This is what's really going on. We look for certain types of chicks to do certain things with. We don't necessarily like them. I feel like the ratchetness or the nakedness or whatever should be left for the bedroom with your husband. Because that's the other thing too. Why are we sleeping around with so many people? Why are we talk about the trauma and that's trapped in our DNA. So now I'm sleeping, God forbid, with one man who slept with 1,000 people. Now I'm sleeping with the 1,000 people plus whoever they slept with. And I don't know how many people are sitting down and telling these young people this. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's so important to understand your body is a gift that you don't have to give away. And then you do have those people who are stepping beyond. And my book, Beyond the Gate, talks about that. Stepping beyond your position as an elder, and you're sleeping with these young people, and so you're not teaching them worth. And so that's what the auction block, the historical ramifications of the auction block are still creating today. And when we in our own community co-sign on this craziness, that's when it persists. So I do not agree with the feminine statement, oh, just be free. You have a husband. I don't know. And when I say you, I'm talking about Beyonce. You have a husband. I don't know. Rumor is that she's being passed around. I don't know. But you're not giving us the perception that you're out here doing whatever. But you're telling other people to do that? It's crazy, it's corny, it's weird, and I don't think that that's what we should be doing as a community. I'm not saying you can't be cute, but I'm a fashion designer. There's ways to be beautiful without showing everything all the time and everywhere. You go to these award shows, and it's just sickening at this point. There's nothing left to the imagination for the man to make him fight for this, So maybe I'm old school. I'm not old, but I know I might be old school, OG, whatever. But I've come to the realization that's not what it's about. Because when your body fades, is your relationship going to fade too?
Yeah, you talk about two things that I kind of want to touch on there. The first one was the sex part. When you have sex with one person, right, you're embodying their spirit and also the spirits of those that they have slept with. And you said, like, in our society today, this is not the message that is being passed on to our young generation. So from that place, what message do you have for not only the young girls, but also young men as well in that space when it comes down to passing energy from that sexual place, because it's such a sacred place as well?
You know what? Thank you. Because I'm telling you, this is God ordained, because as a young person in church, all you heard was keep your skirt hems low, meaning like, at your ankles, and making sure that you're not having sex. But I'm saying to myself, as a female, who we having sex with in the church that I grew up with? Because I know today's time is very different. So it's nice to hear someone say, well, what would I say to the young men? Because I'll tell you really quickly. I remember a good friend of mine having to stand in front of the church with the scarlet letter and apologize for getting pregnant, which first of all, only God can impregnate a person. So that's number one. And how many of y'all are sneaking, having sex with the married deacon in the corner of the church somewhere? Listen, and so it was so hurtful to me to see her stand there, but where was the guy? I think only one time in my lifetime have I heard about a guy standing up in front of the church. So it's very rare in my experiences. Let me start off by saying I am so proud of so many of the young men that I talk to these days, because they're not out here loosey-goosey, a lot of them. Now, there's plenty of them that are, but I want to first embrace the ones that are being great fathers, who are stepping up, who are taking ownership of their position or their posture as a father. There are men who are waiting before they are having sex with someone. I don't know if you heard about the pastor who waited, and on his wedding day, he found out he married a transgender, or a man, right, who was a transgender female, and how hurtful that was. So that's a whole nother podcast. But so there are individuals out here who are doing the right thing. I want to say thank you to them. The young men who think that they have to run through a gambit of women, I think you're going to find out one way or another, and hopefully through this conversation, that you don't have to, because you're looking for the pearl. You're looking for someone that you really want to be with, right? And yes, I understand dating and having a good time, whatever. You could do that with anybody, honestly, and we say that we have sexual needs and all of that. So that means you're ready for marriage? Because that's what sex was actually created for, is to create a family. So just to think before you do something, like before getting a disease, before dying from it, or just finding out that now you're not happy because I know some men who stopped having sex because they had so much of it. So there's a lot to think about before engaging into all of that. And I know there are some women who are not doing right and they're cheating and what have you. I just feel like you need to do your research, really, just like you do with anything else on social media, before you engage. That's what I would say in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. And you talked about one more thing, where you talk about women being hypersexualized, and the way they show up, right? And how it stems from way back, that ripping off the clothes. When you said that, it brought me to the lady, I believe the stage name was Sarah, from South Africa. Which she was brought from Africa to Europe and parade around, right? And have people do sexual stuff to her, even though she didn't probably want to do it. How do you support women in this space, especially Black women in this space, to value their body? Because I know that trauma is still in us, even though sometimes we might not think about it.
That goes back to the healing. So us who have healed, it is our duty to protect those coming after us. How do you protect? You create different programs to either enlighten them about the past, to enlighten them about their body and the importance of it and just what it's worth. Just like people talk about our teeth and not just taking them out because they're crystals, right? So that's what the Black female body is, right? It's precious. And so having those conversations, having spaces for them to feel safe in, so that they don't have to go other places to feel loved. It's our duty as the elders, as those who are getting ready to step in the space of elder, or those who are educated in certain information, to then turnkey it to our younger generation and just pick them up out of the spaces that they're in. We have to create spaces for our young people, not just movie theaters, but other places where they can talk and speak freely and be heard. not just schools, spaces after school and on Saturdays and away from their parents too, so that they can feel free enough to discuss certain things. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I want to ask you this: in your experience, what spiritual tradition or ancestral practice have you found most empowering for reclaiming Black womanhood?
Oh, the list is long, so I'll give you three. Dance. I remember signing up for my AFA in Los Angeles, and that helped me get through a lot. But it also brought me closer to the origin of who I am. I would say art making. Definitely, again, we talk about being out of the self and being free to create and being closer to those spiritual realms and spaces that transport us uh, to that ancestral plane. I would also say prayer,
Mm.
worship, worship. It cleanses, it strengthens, it enlightens, it intunes, it rectifies, it helps us forgive. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, I felt a little bit of, as you spoke, I felt a little bit of meditation healing
Yeah.
in the moment right now. So I hope that whoever's listening to this conversation will also feel that in that moment. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You know, I as we move into this conversation, right? When it comes down to your book, which I read your book Beyond the Gates a while ago, like
Did
2 years ago, when we were going to have our first conversation.
yes.
That was such a long time ago, but I do remember some interesting stories in there, very light. Can you give us a little bit of background about where that book came from and
Oh,
maybe a most significant story in that book that you want
well,
people to?
well, I'll say that I was a vendor, like I said, at Yankee Stadium for, I don't know, 20 years. I had an opportunity in 2009 to vend or hawk in the inaugural new stadium. And so the book is loosely based on some of the zany happenings and experiences that I had as a vendor. And also, it takes us through the life of Nyla, uh, who was in foster care. And of course, I was in foster care. So I wanted to shine light on some homes and some things that have happened. I won't say whether it was personally or not, but that do transpire in foster care. And so I would think the opening scene has to be, to me, the biggest statement that the book makes. There are a lot of huge statements, but I think the opening one, and I was kind of nervous about publishing it, although I was really excited because I just felt like there was such a flow in the writing. And then I said, Nicole, there's so many things that are happening in real time,
Yeah.
families and things like that. And so I said, people need to, I think the biggest thing is being seen, being heard, being felt. And so I wanted people to know, like, you're not alone. You're not alone. And yeah, I think, again, that would be the biggest statement, that sexual abuse is huge in a lot of Black homes because of what transpired in our past.
Mhm.
It's difficult to walk away from, but no other culture is asked to do the same. No other race, no other diaspora. And to be honest, everyone is really from our diaspora, but that's a conversation for another day. But we're not asked. They're not asked to walk away. We are.
Yeah.
And so the book allows you to face the realities. There's some other things I want to do with that book that will be coming forth for people to heal. It's funny that we talk about that, but there's some workbooks that I've been chiming away at, and so that it doesn't just leave the person as a reader, but now you can delve in and have this conversation, even if it's just pen to paper.
Love that. Thank you. Um, Many Black women carry generational trauma as we go down this line, right? While also being seen as pillars of their home. Or, you know, how can Black women honor both the strength and vulnerability of the Black female spirit?
Well, I think that it depends on the warrior, right? Every case sensitive. We are a very diverse and multi-layered um, diaspora. And so some of us will refrain from living in both spaces. Some of us will seek counseling in order to do both. Um, some of us will compartmentalize,
Mm,
and then some of us will shift. And so shifting is a big part of my research. There's a book called Shift or Shifting by Dr. Sharice Jones and Kumia Shorter Gooden. Phenomenal book. It's like they talk about emotional stunt doubling, where the Black woman has to shift from one aspect emotionally or psychologically to be present in another moment. Um, for example, you're at work, you have to become the person who is the subordinate.
mm,
Then quickly you go home and now you're the wife and the mother, and you have to shift into those postures. Does any other woman have to do that? Yes, but it's very, very different for the Black female because of the perceptions that are placed on her that are very different from the white female or any other female, right? That does not consider themselves a part of the diaspora. And so some people call it code switching. I don't call it that because there's such a finesse to shifting. If you've ever seen a basketball player and they're moving, there's such finesse. And I feel like that's what the Black woman is upholding when we talk about the vulnerability and then the boldness, right? And with code shifting, it's like I have to get up, walk over to the wall, put on this light, or shift it to not shift it to, excuse me, turn off the light to shut it off. And so it's like a mechanical kind of movement in my head is what I'm seeing because I'm visual. And so with this shifting, it's like being able to hold both aspects of who we are simultaneously
yeah.
at at will. It's seamless and it looks seamless and it feels seamless, but inside psychologically, it can be quite tumultuous.
Mm. And how do we begin to let it down?
Well, again, we talked about it on so many levels. Is first you have to recognize it. Can't do anything if you don't recognize that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
We're so used to pain from our period, pain from what has happened to us in the past that still trickles down in our DNA and in our bloodstreams. And we're so used to taking on so much that no one has stopped. Well, not, I can't say no one. People have not done enough to say, stop. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it.
Yeah.
And let's decode and and so knowing is half the battle. Knowing who we are in that moment. Do I need counseling? Do I simply need to say no to a thing? Everyone's different. So I don't have one answer for an entire, plethora of people.
Yeah.
So I again, some of us will refrain because we can't take on any more. And some of us will compartmentalize. This is what we do. And then some of us will have an awakening and say, enough. I need to navigate this differently.
Yeah. I think it's a heavy question, and also it's a space, like, I think healing happens when the person is ready, right? When the person is ready to be able to heal, but also when the person is ready to be able to face those dark night of souls in that space.
I disagree because now in my mind, and not to say that what you're saying is 100% incorrect. Absolutely not. I believe that there's validity in what you're saying. But as you were speaking, I thought about the plenty of people who were forced to heal. right? You're in chains, you're inoculated with something, and then there's a healing process that takes place. Now that's in the physical, but that does happen mentally as well. If
Yeah.
you indoctrinating people, but it could be for a positive scenario. I also think about people who are going through withdrawal. They're forced to heal. It's not an easy battle.
Yes.
You know, even with the witchcraft attacks, I was forced in that. And I was forced to figure things out on my own. So
Mhm.
there sometimes healing happens without our permission. There's times that God will surprise us. And I know there's a woman that I was following on social media, and this is where my encouragement came from, because I lost a lot of my hair due to witchcraft attacks. And you can't really talk about this to everyone. At this point, I could care less because I wear this thing on my head all the time. But she had lost hair due to witchcraft attacks, and she showed the progression of God restoring her.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, there is hope. Even though, you know, you believe in God, whatever, but manifestation is everything,
Yep.
right? You know, you could believe till you're blue in the face, but once you see the results, you know, and so God sometimes can surprise you, and he can do things that you're not even aware of until someone brings it to your attention, whether it's you. So I think that, again, it's case sensitive.
I agree. I agree. But I also want to touch on the part that even if
Mm-mm.
you are forced to heal and there's that awareness that doesn't hit, you're not going to recognize that you're healing. And that's why I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you know, we self-sabotage. Like,
Mm.
even though we have gone through that same lesson, God has bring us the right people, the right things, the right stuff, and we feel good inside, but we still self-sabotage because that lack of awareness isn't it's not there yet. And I think that's why I talk about when healing is when you're ready in that space. It's like when you're aware of the fact that now I am healed, even if you didn't like cause the healing to happen for yourself.
I
That's the
feel,
space I kind of say.
and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's not about right or wrong. I
Yeah,
it
yeah.
very differently. And again, I don't believe in lessons. As a
Mm,
teacher, I don't believe in lessons. It annoys me to no end when people are like, oh, God is, what lesson is God? No, he's not. Because guess what? If God knows the end from the beginning, how he don't know that he don't need a lesson to teach you anything? He's training us, but I don't believe that there's a lesson, or no, not a lesson, excuse me, I'm using the wrong word. It's test. That's the word. I don't believe too much in lessons either, but testing. You didn't use that word, but that's the word that people often use. It drives me to no end. He knows what the results are going to be. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
I
So,
agree. I agree.
yeah. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you as well. How do you like the next question that we're gonna dive into here is how do you see art as I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how do you see art as a spiritual practice in terms of connecting to your ancestors and the future generation?
Yeah, we definitely talked about that already.
Yeah, very
Reaching beyond yourself and being able to share your findings with the youth, the younger folks, and having them see newer ideas and identifying newer realities for themselves.
mhm.
Bringing it all in one scope, going to the past while you're leaving yourself from the present, and then turn keying that information, whether it's through your art, through a conversation, through dance, whatever it is, and having the newer eyes
Mm,
identify what they see, giving them space for voice.
yeah, I love that. Wow. In envisioning, right? Talking about arts here, envisioning the future, what spiritual tools or wisdom do you hope to Black women will pass down to the next generation and women in general as well?
Well, I'm going to bring the focus back to the Black female body, that it's okay to cover up your body. I'm not saying that you have to be covered from head to toe, because I don't believe in that either, but being respectful, to yourself and to others in that way. Still being fly, being whoever you are, beautiful. You can cover up to. It's okay.
Mm.
You're not missing out on anything.
Yeah, love that. And our last question here is, how do you practice self-care? How do you care for your mental health? My apologies. How do you care for your mental health and practice self-love?
I would say audaciously maintaining high levels of alacrity, finding joy in the small things in life. You know, the Bible talks about it being better for the poor having the little that they have
Mhm.
than the evil or the wicked rejoicing in the much, in the many, in whatever it is that they have. So finding joy in the smallest things, a car maybe going by with some music that comes on and you start dancing and you invite people into that space and a smile, you know, emerges on their face, and you know, just making light hearted moments in the spaces that I'm in, because bringing other people joy is what makes me so, so happy.
And how do you practice self-love for you?
That is self-love for
Oh,
me.
I like that.
Yes,
So
yes,
self-love connects with self-care.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
thank you. Thank you. Any final words for our friends and family members that are listening in our conversation today?
Well, I would love for everyone to check out my books either on Amazon. If you're not buying from Amazon, I get it, but I need your help. So anyway, my website is my full name, Nicole, Nicole, Elaine, Elaine, Avery, Avery.com. You can also go to Broadway Empire. I have some of my books on there as well, and support me in that way.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this conversation. Nicole, I want to say thank you for joining me on here and um, pouring wisdom and knowledge onto us in so many different areas in our life, and also giving us a little bit of healing moment in this conversation. I'm not sure if anyone felt it, but I definitely did throughout this conversation. So thank you so much for that. We are going to attack your website in the description part of this conversation. So guys, if you want to check out Nicole's work, you know, her link is going to be in the description part of this conversation. So thank you guys again so much for listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. I appreciate all of you. In this moment, I want to ask you, if you have yet to subscribe to Self-Reflection Podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscription button. It will mean a lot to us as we seek to grow this community out here. And Nicole, I definitely hope to bring you back on this conversation. There's so many things that you kind of touch on here that I was like, okay, maybe we could have went that route. We could have went that route. So there's so much more that I would love for us to, you know, talk on this conversation on Self-Reflection Podcast.
Thank you.
I hope you guys have a blessed day. Take care of yourself, love yourself, be kind, and be gentle with yourself. Until next time, you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast, and this is your girl, Lira. Ta-da!